Welcome to Part 4 of Murder in a Cab. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 13. Quentin settled into his chair and began his story. After I left you this morning, my first stop was the Tombs. The Tombs, Sullivan interrupted. Yes, the cab driver has been sent to the Tombs to await trial for being involved in the murder of the unknown man whose body was found in his cab. Kennedy's. Exactly Kennedy's, but of course the police aren't aware of that yet. Did you get to see the cab driver? Yes, as a reporter for The Tempest, I was able to secure an interview with him. When he was first arrested, the man, who goes by the name Riley, was too shaken to tell a coherent story. His lawyer laughed at him when he heard his account and told him to leave the storytelling to an experienced lawyer if he wanted any hope of avoiding the electric chair. Understandably, the poor guy was reluctant to open up to a stranger. But I eventually earned his trust by showing him that I believed his story and that I was on a quest to find the real culprits who were making him their scapegoat. It turns out that yesterday afternoon, around 3 o'clock, he was at the cab stand in front of Madison Square when a man who matched Oliver's description approached him. This man hired him to drive to the Fulton Street ferry. Once they arrived at the ferry, he instructed Riley to take him to a rundown bar on South Street. After entering the bar, the man came back out a few minutes later and invited the cab driver to join him for a drink. They sat down at a table that already had a bottle and 2 glasses on it. Oliver poured one of the drinks for Riley, who drank it, and likely many more. After that, he recalls nothing until Oliver roughly shook him awake and led him out into the street. The cold air revived him, and as he looked back, he realized he had noticed several things that hadn't seemed important at the time, but now felt significant. First, it was completely dark outside. Second, the cab, which had been facing south when he stepped into the barroom, was now turned to face north. Third, Oliver kept his left hand pressed against the inside of his coat. He looked very pale and appeared weak and sick. With great effort, he climbed onto the box beside Riley and told him to drive uptown. Soon, the cab driver began to doze off again. The next thing he remembered was coming to after the cab was overturned by the cable car. There was no doubt that he had been drugged. It was likely that while he appeared to be drunk in the barroom, Oliver had directed the cab to the Knickerbocker Bank, planning to sneak Kennedy inside without Riley realizing it. A clever move, since it would completely cover their tracks if they intended to get rid of the bookkeeper, which they clearly did. Everett may have met him at the bank on purpose. However, I think it's more likely he was there without Oliver's knowledge, possibly to keep an eye on him and ensure his orders were followed. He intervened just in time, and then, like a cautious general, withdrew to a safe distance to oversee what happened next. What I still can't grasp is why Oliver took the huge risk of moving Kennedy's body from the bank, considering Everett's plan was clearly to eliminate the bookkeeper regardless. The only explanation I can come up with is that Everett believed he could hide the body somehow and keep it out of the police's reach. For an average criminal, this would be utter foolishness, but given Everett's capabilities, I hesitate to criticize his strategy without fully grasping his ultimate goal. From what I've seen of his work so far, I have developed a deep admiration for the man's brilliance and cunning mischief. Thankfully, fate was not on his side this time. The cable car that overturned the cab delivered Kennedy's body right into the hands of the police, providing the key clue that could have allowed Everett to go undiscovered indefinitely. "You really think you'll manage to catch this villain?" Sullivan asked eagerly. "As long as there's life, there's hope," Quentin replied, determination etched on his face. "But I must admit, things don't look too promising right now. Let me finish my report. Amid the chaos that followed the cab's overturning, Oliver managed to escape, as you know, and he has so far eluded capture, even though the police are on high alert for him. Every steamship sailing out, every train leaving New York is being monitored, but so far it's yielded no results. Personally, I believe Oliver hasn't even tried to leave the city yet. Isn't it likely, though, that he ran off from New York right after making his escape from the overturned cab? Sullivan countered. I don't think so, Quentin said. With his injured hand, he's a recognizable target. He'd stick out in another city. His safest bet is to hide here in New York, where he probably has friends who could help him stay hidden. But for now, he's under the radar, and we've lost the trail. The police are floundering in the dark at the moment, and so am I. The banker looked visibly disappointed. So that's all you've managed to uncover, not a single lead on the money. It's hard to believe that $250,000 can vanish without leaving a single trace. If we can track down Everett, Quentin replied, I'm confident we'll be able to uncover most of the money. Yes, he continued thoughtfully. That's all I've been able to find so far, or at least all that seems relevant at the moment. I did speak with Mr. Murray and Mr. Scott, but aside from confirming that Oliver, much like Kennedy, was an exemplary employee, they only provided me with the address of Oliver's boarding house. When I inquired there, I found out that the accountant had moved out on New Year's Eve without leaving a forwarding address. I've also looked into one other potential lead, but I can't yet say whether it will amount to anything. It might be insignificant, but who knows? It could very well be the key to solving the whole case. And what is this intriguing lead? Sullivan asked eagerly. There isn't much to share at this point, Quentin replied. You'll remember that, based on the evidence we've gathered, Oliver was attacked by Kennedy while he was on the phone. Yes, I recall how thoroughly you pieced together that scene. Well, the reporter continued, I realized right away that the telephone might serve as a key witness for the prosecution if I could find out who Oliver was speaking with when he was shot. I went to the central office to make inquiries. Since I could pinpoint almost the exact moment of that call, it was relatively easy to locate the young woman who had answered it. The odds were that she wouldn't recall the number dialed, but she did. Something about the call had lodged it in her memory because of some unusual circumstances. Apparently, after connecting Oliver, the operator reached out to him again. As she listened for a response, a sudden loud noise startled her, followed by a scream. Then she heard a jumble of voices, and soon after, another loud bang. That was followed by silence, leaving her unable to get any answers despite her repeated calls. You have evidence to support what happened between Oliver and Kennedy, Sullivan remarked. Yes, but that isn't what I was looking for. I wanted to know the name of the person Oliver was trying to reach. Did you find it? The phone number he provided belongs to the Manhattan Chemical Company. And what exactly is the Manhattan Chemical Company? That's what I asked people in the business sector. They told me they knew very little about the company. It seems to have been around for a couple of years, but never seeks credit, preferring to pay cash for everything it orders. I decided to check the Manhattan Chemical Company myself. Their office and store are in the basement of an old, run-down building, while the upper floors are rented out as offices. The lab and manufacturing area are in the cellar. The store is sparse, with just a few chairs and a long counter lined with shelves filled with bottles boasting bright labels. Signs on the walls promote Dr. Henderson's cough cure and Dr. Henderson's liver specific. I didn't expect to find anyone there on New Year's Day, so I was surprised to see a lone clerk sitting with his feet up on the desk, completely engrossed in a newspaper. He was a pale young man, with washed-out blonde hair, watery green-blue eyes, and a thin mustache that did little to hide his weak-looking mouth. He stood to greet me with a look of surprise that suggested business wasn't exactly booming at that place. If we were to judge by the appearance of the office at the Manhattan Chemical Company, it seems that business in patent medicines is not thriving at the moment. By the way, have you ever heard of Dr. Henderson's remedies? No, I can't say that I have, Sullivan replied. That's the strange part, said Quentin. I've been unable to find any advertisements from this company, and it's usually through extensive advertising that such a business survives. Yes, of course, Sullivan said, a bit impatiently. But what does this have to do with Oliver? I'm not sure, Quentin responded. It might mean nothing. It could also mean quite a lot. I asked to see Dr. Henderson, he continued, and the sleepy clerk looked at me as if I had just walked in from Mars. Dr. Henderson wasn't in. No one seemed to know when he would return. From what I could gather, Dr. Henderson is quite the enigmatic figure. No one seems to know much about him. Even the clerk confessed he'd only seen him once or twice in the 18 months he's been managing the office. The doctor handles the manufacturing himself. His laboratory, located in the cellar, is heavily guarded. No one gets in there under any circumstances. He clearly doesn't want anyone discovering the secrets behind his prized remedies. You say that as if there's a deeper meaning beneath your words, Sullivan remarked, examining the reporter's expression. No, Quentin replied thoughtfully, but I'm trying to connect some deeper significance to the facts. There's definitely something mysterious about Dr. Henderson and the Manhattan Chemical Company, but whether that mystery is legitimate or not, and if it's not, whether it connects in any way to the Kennedy case, is something I can't figure out at this point. After a brief pause, he added, When I realized I wouldn't be able to see Dr. Henderson, I took a chance and asked about the manager. For a moment, a confused expression crossed the young man's otherwise blank face. Then, as if a light bulb went off in his head, he exclaimed, Oh, I see, you mean Mr. Smith. Yes, I said, seizing the opportunity. Well, Mr. Smith isn't here either. I suggested that I could wait for Mr. Smith and moved toward the door of the private office in the back, which clearly read, No admittance. I had turned the knob before the clerk could intervene, but the door was locked. Apparently, Mr. Smith only came to the office once a week to receive the clerk's report and pay his salary. I tried to arrange a special appointment with Mr. Smith, claiming I had important business to discuss. I provided a false name and address so that Mr. Smith's reply could be sent to me. That was all I could manage for now, but I thought it wise to keep an eye on the Manhattan Chemical Company. So I hired private detectives to monitor it day and night until further notice, and that's where things stand. Sullivan rose from his chair, looking weary and concerned. Mr. Quentin, he said, if you can recover any part of that $250,000, a generous portion of whatever you find for the bank will be yours. The reporter's face flushed, and he bit his lip, but he responded calmly, You're mistaken, Mr. Sullivan. I'm not a detective. I'm just a reporter. The Tempest will pay me for any work I do on this case. You'd be better off offering your reward to the police. Chapter 14. There's a certain magic in the refreshing sleep of youth, a remedy for the blues that life sometimes brings. When Reynard woke after a restful night, greeted by the golden rays of a crisp January day, he was filled with the pure joy of being alive. The ease in his muscles, the warmth of blood coursing through his veins, and the hunger in his belly all reminded him of the simple pleasure of existence. He recalled the blue devils that had plagued him the day before and found it hard to make sense of them. Yes, he was in love, but that alone shouldn't have caused him to feel so downcast. There were whispers that the object of his affections was about to become engaged to someone else. But how much weight can you give to public gossip? The truth was, Miss Trumbo wore no rings. Without the sign of being promised to another, wasn't he justified in believing that she was still free? In that case, he had just as good a chance at winning her heart as anyone else. Of course, no man could truly be worthy of Dahlia Trumbo. That was a given. But in matters of love, victory doesn't only favor the deserving. If it did, humanity would find itself in dire straits. With those thoughts swirling in his mind, hope settled back into his heart. Miss Trumbo would not pose for him again, but Reynard was eager to continue working on her portrait. Just as he prepared to head into the studio after breakfast, the housekeeper interrupted, announcing that his lawyer had come to speak with him about some pressing matters. The entire morning was consumed by this necessary yet tedious business, and it wasn't until after lunch that the artist finally had the freedom to begin his work. As he uncovered the portrait and stepped back to assess it, something white on the floor caught his eye. He bent down to pick it up. It was a letter written in a clear, elegant hand. Automatically, he turned it over and began to unfold it. He casually glanced over the letter, and in an instant, realization struck him. With a surge of anger, he tossed it aside. A few words and a signature had left a mark on his memory, but those scattered phrases were seared into his mind, etched in flames that reached deep into his soul. He recognized the letter that had been delivered to Miss Trumbo by the messenger the day before. He had seen enough to understand it was filled with declarations of passionate love. In that moment, his last shred of hope faded away. Overcome by a profound sense of despair, he sank back onto a chaise and remained there for a long time, lost in painful thoughts. Yet, despite his artistic tendencies, Reynard possessed a solid character when necessary. After a while, he gathered his strength and dignity, determined to act as a gentleman should in such a situation. He picked up the letter once more, slipped it unread into an envelope, and slipped his card inside, along with a brief note explaining how he came across the letter. After addressing the envelope, he resolved to deliver it himself. "Thomas Oliver," he muttered as he descended the stairs. "Thomas Oliver. He's the one who took such care to tell me that Miss Trumbo was engaged, or about to be engaged, the flashy young man with red hair who frequently attends the Murdochs, casual gatherings, but never seems to be invited on the more formal occasions. An insignificant, self-important fool. It's such a shame she would waste herself on someone like him. But if he marries her, he must make her happy, or else." He left the rest of the thought unspoken, but his face hardened with resolve, and his hands clenched tightly in determination. Reynard, clutching the letter for Miss Trumbo, rushed toward the nearest mailbox. He lifted the lid, slipped the letter into the slot, then hesitated, tightening his grip on it as he began to reflect. If he mailed it, the letter might not reach her until the next morning. It could be important since it had been sent by messenger and was addressed to the studio rather than Miss Trumbo's home. Besides, she would likely be anxious when she noticed it was missing. It should be returned to her immediately. At that moment, he pulled the letter back out from the mailbox. Yes, it needed to be delivered by messenger rather than by mail. But a messenger. The nearest messenger office was about half a mile away, and the Murdochs' house was only a bit farther. Why not take it to her himself? Why not, indeed? The human heart is a deep and confusing place. Why would a hopeless lover long for just a glimpse of the woman whose very presence deepens his sorrow? Who can explain that? Reynard carefully tucked the letter into his breast pocket and set off again, this time heading toward the Murdochs' home. Chapter 15. Miss Trumbo was seated at the piano in the drawing-room, her elegant fingers gliding thoughtfully over the keys, when a servant knocked at the door. "A gentleman to see you, miss," said the maid. "A visitor," exclaimed Dahlia in surprise. "At this hour? Did he give you his card?" "No, miss, nor his name either." "Well then, Mary," Dahlia replied, a mix of amusement and seriousness in her tone, "why announce him? I think it's best if you keep an eye on the hat rack." "He ain't no thief, miss," the maid insisted. "He's dressed too well for that. Besides, I've seen him here before. A handsome young fellow with red hair, Mr. Chapman." "Oliver," Dahlia suggested, suddenly serious. "Yes, miss, that's him." "I cannot receive him," Miss Trumbo said coldly. "I'm surprised John let him in after the clear instructions I gave him yesterday. From now on, I am never at home to Mr. Oliver." "Your butler is not to blame in this case," a voice from the hallway declared, and before either woman could register their surprise, a flamboyantly dressed young man with striking red hair strode into the room. He had his left arm in a sling, and his face was pale. His eyes shone with a feverish light, and his voice trembled with suppressed excitement. "I was waiting for your father in his office when I heard your maid pass by. I asked her to announce me, hoping for a more welcoming reception, though I can hardly say I expected it." After the initial shock wore off, Miss Trumbo straightened her graceful figure to its full height, regarding the young man with open contempt in her eyes. Oliver seemed to pause, anticipating a response, then finally said, "Shall I explain the purpose of my visit in front of your servant?" "You may leave, Mary, until I ring for you," Dahlia instructed, turning toward the maid. The woman hesitated as she left the room, casting curious glances at her young mistress and the unwelcome visitor. Oliver moved as if to take a seat, but Dahlia stood her ground. "Perhaps," she said coolly, "you can explain, as briefly as you can, why you feel the need to intrude upon me like this." "I know my behavior may seem inappropriate to you," he replied, his voice filled with distress. "But what else can I do? I love you fiercely, and you won't even let me tell you. You've instructed your servants to turn me away as if I were a beggar. Is it wrong to love you?" "No, Mr. Oliver," Dahlia said, her tone softening. "It's not wrong to love someone, but it's certainly a mistake to show your affection in the way you have, and it's not fair to impose it on me like this." "What else can I do?" he insisted stubbornly. "I find myself compelled to leave New York for an extended period, perhaps forever, and I can't get a single word in with you. I came by yesterday morning and was told you were at that artist's studio. Then I wrote you a letter asking for a chance to speak, and I even left it there for you. The only response I received was that you told your butler not to let me in if I came back. I can't leave like this, without any hope to ease my absence, while you are here surrounded by men eager to marry you." Seeing the genuine distress in his awkward demeanor, Dahlia felt a surge of pity for him. "I truly regret this, Mr. Oliver," she said earnestly, "more than I can express. But what can I do? I don't feel for you as you wish, and love cannot be forced. I've done everything I can to discourage you, because—" "I know you have," Oliver interrupted. "You've been avoiding me, shutting me down, and doing everything possible to make it clear that you don't care for me." "It would have been misguided kindness to act differently," Dahlia replied gently. "No, it wouldn't," the accountant shot back. "I'm not asking you to fall in love with me right away, but just give me a chance. Give me time. Give me a little hope." "I can't do that," she said quietly. "Why not?" he pressed, growing more agitated. "I've sacrificed everything for you. I've given up everything I had. I've lost my job. I've even risked my life." "I don't understand," Miss Trumbo said, gazing at him in disbelief. "Your father would understand," he replied, his voice rough. "He encouraged me to pursue this. He promised me that you'd accept me." "My father promised." "Yes, your father, and by God." Growing increasingly intense, Oliver brought his clenched fist down on the table beside him. He visibly fought to suppress the curse that almost escaped his lips. Miss Trumbo, startled and confused, watched him in shocked silence. After a brief struggle, the accountant pleaded desperately. "I'm not asking for much right now. Just tell me one thing, and I'll leave satisfied for now. Say that no other man has a better chance with you than I do. Say that you don't love anyone else." Dahlia tried to look away from his intense gaze. "Say it," he demanded suddenly, his tone turning serious. Drawing herself up with dignity, she replied coldly. "I don't see by what right you think you can question me or give me orders," she said, moving as if to press the button for the electric bell. Oliver noticed the movement and rushed forward to block her way. "Ah, so that's how it is," he exclaimed, jealousy burning in his voice. "You're in love with someone else." The words caught in his throat. Blood rushed to his head, and the veins on his temples throbbed vividly as he grasped at his collar, a wild intensity shining in his eyes. Dahlia saw the madness in his gaze and recoiled in fear. "I have been played for a fool," he shouted in desperation. "I've been used, and now that I've done what you wanted, I'm to be tossed aside like a worthless dog. The dirty work is finished, is it? We'll see what your father has to say about this, but know one thing for sure." His voice dropped to a low, threatening whisper, each word sharp and clear. "If I can't marry you, then no one will." As he said this, he leaned heavily on the nearby table, fingers tightening around a jeweled paper knife. At that moment, there was a dangerous glint in his eye, and Dahlia felt a chill of fear wash over her. Just then, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She opened her mouth to call for help, but before she could make a sound, the door swung open to reveal the concerned face of the housemaid, who knew it was time to interrupt. "Mr. Reynard, miss," she announced, giving a reassuring nod to her young mistress, whose pale face and wide eyes had not gone unnoticed. Reynard stood in the doorway, noticeably uneasy, glancing between Dahlia and Oliver, unsure of what to do. "I apologize for intruding, Miss Trumbo," he finally said. "Your maid mentioned that I might find you available. Perhaps I should come back later." "No, no, Mr. Reynard," the young girl exclaimed, rushing toward him with her arms open wide. "I'm so happy to see you." Noticing his curious glance toward Oliver, she added coolly, "I believe this gentleman has said everything he needed to say to me." Oliver's earlier enthusiasm had faded. Now he looked pale and weak as he nervously clenched his trembling right hand. "I'll wait to see Dr. Trumbo," he said stubbornly in a low voice. "As you wish," Dahlia replied after a brief hesitation. "Mary, please show Mr. Oliver to the doctor's study." As the accountant followed the servant out of the room, despair was etched across his face. Reynard almost thought he heard a quiet sob as the door closed. Unconsciously, Dahlia had been holding Reynard's hand, but as the sense of danger faded, she realized what she was doing and quickly withdrew her hand from his reassuring grip. The artist, reminded of the reason for his visit, immediately grew serious and formal. "I apologize for coming to you at such an unusual hour, Miss Trumbo, but I found this letter in my studio today. It appears to have been dropped by you yesterday, and I thought it might be important, so—" "A letter? What letter?" Dahlia asked, her confusion evident. Reynard extended the sealed envelope. She tore it open and glanced at the contents with hurried eyes. Realization struck her suddenly, and in a burst of emotion, she ripped the paper into shreds and angrily tossed them into the bright flames of the fireplace. "Oh, that!" she exclaimed with disdain. Then, after a moment's pause, she asked, "Are you saying you thought?" She stopped abruptly, overcome by a sudden shyness. "What else could I think?" Reynard replied gently, his gaze fixed on the remnants of paper flickering in the fire. The flames that consumed them seemed to cast a warm glow over his heart. "Then," he continued, his voice softer still, "if there is nothing between you and him, maybe I can hope, Miss Trumbo, Dahlia." His hand reached for hers and found it. But the reaction finally came, and the brave girl who had managed to hold herself together in front of a menacing madman now succumbed to a wave of hysterical crying. Reynard, not being a doctor, had no real idea how to handle a situation like this. All he could do was whisper comforting words to her and gently kiss the tears from her cheeks, but that seemed to be enough. Clearly, he had some sort of instinct about how to help her, for after sobbing for a while on his shoulder, Dahlia gradually calmed down, content to nestle in his arms. The artist, perhaps anxious about her slipping back into distress, continued this tender treatment a bit longer than necessary, grateful for the immediate and profound effect it had on her. One might suggest to the medical field that this simple, albeit informal, approach may hold certain benefits worth exploring. Chapter 16. I have to tell you, Quentin, this is an amazing discovery. I can't say what other uses it might have in different fields, but I truly believe it's going to change the game in surgical diagnosis, Dr. Fletcher said, brimming with excitement. Absolutely, Quentin answered. I have no doubt Röntgen's rays will be incredibly helpful for surgeons when examining fractures and locating foreign objects that can't be found with a probe. To illustrate that point, I must show you a wonderful photograph I just developed. After we spoke on New Year's morning, I found a patient asleep in my office. He'd been waiting for several hours. It was the usual case of a pistol in the hands of a careless friend who didn't realize it was loaded, leading to the all-too-familiar result, a bullet wound for my patient. Quentin listened, somewhat distractedly, while his friend continued. The wound wasn't severe. No bones were broken. The bullet entered through the palm of his left hand and traveled up into his forearm. A spark of interest lit up in Quentin's eyes, though he kept a relaxed posture. Well, despite my best efforts, I couldn't locate the bullet with a probe. Finally, I decided to try the Röntgen rays, and here's the result. It's one of the best shadow photographs I've ever seen. With that, Dr. Fletcher handed a photograph to Quentin, who examined it closely in silence. "Look how clearly you can see the unique shape the bullet has taken," the doctor pointed out. "Yes," Quentin replied. "I noticed that. Do you have a duplicate you could let me keep?" "Sure, take that one if you like." "Thank you. I'm really glad to have it. Were you able to remove the bullet?" "I haven't tried yet. I needed to develop the photograph first." "Of course. When do you expect that red-haired fellow to come back?" "He said he would return yesterday, but he didn't show up," Dr. Fletcher replied. Then, all of a sudden. "But who said anything about him being young or red-haired?" "Not you, certainly, old man," Quentin replied with a smile. "Don't fret. You haven't accidentally revealed any professional secrets. Still, your patient is wanted by the police. It was only a matter of time before he got caught. This revelation will just speed things up. I tracked him to your place and knew how he was injured, so I recognized him as soon as you mentioned his case." "Who is he?" Fletcher asked. "I'm sure I've seen him before, but I can't quite place where." At that, the reporter recounted the story of Oliver's involvement in the Knickerbocker bank case.